Hi, everyone. Welcome to the mlai podcast. So today's episode is a candid conversation with a parent who also happens to be a cybersecurity expert. It's about how, despite his best efforts, a young man he was caring for was still drawn into some of these toxic spaces online, from coded meme culture to manosphere influencers, and how that spiral impacted his family. Now, today's interviewee has chosen not to be named, but it is okay showing his face. So if you do see him in the video version, or if you recognize his voice, obviously it goes without saying, but please don't go and tag and identify him online. Quick content note and trigger warning: today's episode does contain themes of online misogyny, youth mental health, self-harm, violence, and police involvement. So please listen with care. It's probably not appropriate for young children, and check the show notes for support resources. Now, we're doing this episode to help young people, parents, educators basically understand what's happening to our young men. Why is the pull towards some of these cultures so strong? Why are technical controls often not enough? And what are the practical measures? So huge thanks to our supporters, the eSafety Commissioner, the University of Melbourne, AWS, Lyra, and our community supporters for helping to back this work. And if this topic really fires you up, please join us on the 29th and 30th of November 2025 for the eSafety Hackathon. It's called Needle in the Hashtag, where we have two challenges. One is a mini challenge where we've actually created a completely synthetic online community. Imagine like a fake Facebook or a fake book, if you will. That's, got millions of messages, tens of thousands of these AI personas that we've trained to act like incels, treadwives, people with body dysmorphia issues, just general griefers, conspiracy theorists, a whole bunch of different personas, and it'll be your job to kind of build something that can classify out of, all of this content, who is who. And then the grand challenge will be to interview some of these people that have lived experience of this, interview our mentors, our researchers, really understand what's happening in this space and come up with your own problem to solve, and then solve it and pitch it to some judges to win some pretty cool prizes. So please bring your skills, bring your story, bring your ideas and your team. Let's build something together. I wonder if you could start at the beginning, just take us through in your own words, what happened.
So from a very young age, we, as parents, we had decided, and being somebody in IT, we had taken a proactive step to make sure that all of the children's access to the internet was very carefully planned. So we invented software called Net Nanny, which is not a great name, in all honesty, for an app, but Net Nanny installs on your smartphone and on laptops, Mac and Windows. And yeah, it's a way, it basically effectively replaces the browser and locks down the system. And the young adult is then, they have to use NetNanny's browser, which has lots and lots of protections and stuff on it. And it's really, really good. Worked very, very well. So in about 2020, I think, one of the young persons that I was caring for, had started to show some very unusual behaviors at school. And without going into lots and lots and lots of individual detail, I would describe that behavior as generally negative towards women, female teachers as well as females, but female teachers, and difficult behavior at home, and becoming increasingly more difficult, disengaging with school. So it then starts to, we start to investigate why this stuff is happening in this school. We're trying to help. So I then started to more closely look at computer use, was reasonably confident with the iPhone that was locked down. However, I would add in here straight away, whilst it's in front of mind, is that have discovered then and more recently, actually, with another child, that quite often when you set child settings on an iPhone, sometimes those settings can get lost when there's an update. So one of my current youngest at the moment has just been through this. We had restrictions on the iPad, safety restrictions for a 10-year-old, and during an update they were all completely reset, and we didn't know for about a month. He had full access to some stuff. So that's a good point there, that a lot of parents wouldn't necessarily know that. You set these things and you forget because you assume. So anyway, so during the investigation of trying to find out what was going on, started looking more closely at the computer use, and had discovered that this young person had managed to circumnavigate the use of NetNanny. So we re-established NetNanny and locked down the PC even further, and that basically became a cat and mouse game for a period of time, where I would lock things down, and then he would work out a way around it. Got to the point where he just basically would fully reset the machine from scratch, reinstall Windows, or run a virtual machine was another one, and just access whatever he wanted. If you install a virtual machine, of course, and run that through VMware, there's no restrictions. It's a computer in its own right. So so even as an IT person, it was really worrying, and he was wanting to start with Discord groups. There are various Discord groups, and a lot of it was meme culture. So there were a lot, in fact, I would say almost the primary way for these individuals to communicate was not necessarily text and words, it was with memes. Now, as a 49-year-old, that's, I don't know what most of the memes mean anyway. Some of them can appear, I don't know. So it's difficult, So the language some of these people use is coded, basically. It's like a coded language. So trying to interpret the meaning. What does the meme mean? This meme that is exchanged with 5 people. What does it mean? And the people obviously using Discord or Reddit, it's anonymous. They're not using their real names. There's no way to contact them other than their account with a DM. So it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to lock that down, to try and restrict it. And it got to a point where this particular young person was 15, and the behavior was becoming really very extreme, to the point where he had dropped out, where it started to do some drugs in school. Then that led to eventually him pulling out of school altogether before year 12, carrying knives in school, bringing them home, doing drugs at home on the property, was involved in crime, violence. It was, it was a very strange, weird escalation over, I think it was basically about 18 months. It went from being the boy I knew and loved very much, and I still love, but the boy I knew, who was like me when I was 15, to suddenly being a young man that I literally didn't recognize. I didn't recognize or was able to relate to any of the behaviors at all. It was like a stranger had moved into my house, and it was very, very, it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. So there was no doubt in my mind, having seen the material that he was looking at on the internet, that was a key part in, the word I'd use is probably radicalization. You can see from the messages that it just started off with reasonably innocent banter about things and girls and women, and then suddenly that gets a little bit more serious, and there's more intense and more serious memes. You can see like the build up,
Especially at a time like that young person was 15, and at that time, like, your brain is breaking down and building itself up again and breaking down like it's soy plastic. It's such a susceptible period, at a
it
time when
is.
kids are, kind of looking for that connection online. And oh my gosh. Thanks
Yeah, so
for sharing
it was
that. But yeah,
that's okay. And it ended in reasonably I'll be honest, it ended in a pretty extreme situation. Fortunately, no one got seriously injured. There was some violent crime, but it wasn't anyone. No one got seriously injured, but there was domestic violence in our house, and as I say, carrying of very dangerous weapons in and out of the house. It eventuated. We had child services involved, and we had the police and proactive policing. We were doing everything we possibly could. But the only way that I could really try and influence his behavior was to control the Wi-Fi password, which I know sounds absolutely crazy. But at 15, you can't make somebody do something. If you say you're not going out at 12 o'clock at night, you can't stop them. You can't physically stop. He was bigger than me anyway. Literally, the only thing I had was the Wi-Fi password. That's how sad it is. And that's a big wake-up call when you suddenly realize that this little person's grown up to 15, 16-year-old, and you have pretty much no influence and no say over what they do. Is very scary.
for any parents that might be watching or listening, what were some of the first changes you saw in this young person in their behavior?
The first behaviors I think were becoming more prominent at school, because when somebody lives with you, it's more difficult to see behavioral changes. And of course, they're growing up rapidly, emotions and, adolescence, puberty, all that kind of stuff. So, emotions can change. And yeah, anyone with kids will probably, would know that, they can be so and so person at 12, but by the time they get to the end of 12 or 13, they can be sometimes a different person. So it's more difficult to see it at home. It's more gradual and not noticeable, but not as noticeable. So it was more the school, really. It was more the school started to contact us and say, look, we're a bit worried about, this person's doing this behavior, or this person has acted in, it was becoming more sexual. So it started off with a disruption within the school, but then was becoming sexual towards teachers and female students. And there was a steep escalation within a period of about probably 6 months, I'd say. So it was basically, it was the school really that was flagging stuff that we didn't know was
Hmm.
going on.
Yeah. Okay. And then what was the kind of steps that you took from there? That's when you started maybe troubleshooting with the school to try and figure out what was potentially going on, but then you yourself, that's when, like what kind of
Yeah.
stage, how long did it
But
take before you sort of figured out that it was some of these influential groups that
yeah.
are online?
So I would say that we worked with the school for a few months to try and, as you said, try and work out what was going on. He was also actually seeing a counsellor across this time. So they were involved. He had supports involved as well, external from the family. Um, and we weren't able to get to the bottom of it. He was suspended a few times from school for some of his behaviour, so that was difficult. And I suppose I can't really remember for sure, but I think the negative behaviors towards women was the point when we started to really get concerned. And that's at the point I started to look more closely at the computer use and what was going on there, because the assumption was that Net Nanny was doing its job. As far as I was concerned, quite wrongly, it was quite difficult to get around software like Net Nanny. I was actually wrong. It's actually, with some Googling, it's not that difficult. um, so start to look more closely at the computer use, and that's when started to discover that he was using Discord and that kind of stuff.
I was going to mention as well, this is a strange question to ask, so like I apologize, we might end up cutting this, but the fact that he was so good at getting around these things, and like you as a cybersecurity expert, you'd like put something in place and then he'd figure a way around it. Um, is there a part of you at that point was like maybe a little bit impressed by just like his
Yeah, it,
ability? Maybe he was taking after his father to kind of like Yeah,
Absolutely.
in a way, that's like kind of
Yeah,
impressive.
in fact, at one point there was actually a conversation where I was trying to relate to him and trying to engage, and he dropped out of school by this point from memory, and I was trying to find some way to link us back in as a family and as a father and son. I actually said to him he was very interested, like a lot of kids, on being a YouTuber. That was the future career choice of being a YouTuber. And I actually said to him, look, I'd had some experience with YouTube videos. I had a channel, a small channel. So I said to him, look, why don't we set up a YouTube channel together? You can use my cameras and my recording equipment. I had some lights, and I'll put some LEDs in your room, and we could go through and teach you some white hat hacking skills and some penetration testing skills. And you can demonstrate that, without breaking the law, obviously doing it ethically. But yes, yes, absolutely. I had thought that, hold on, he's actually really skillful here, and he could actually put this to good use. He's naturally, clearly like my brain, in that respect. So it could be put to good use, but unfortunately not interested at that time.
Was going through, the only thing I'm thinking is just how hard that would be if this young person that, you know, um, they're growing up, they're going through things, and obviously, like, you love them more than, like, you care about them more than yourself, right?
Yeah.
But they're being kind of taken or manipulated or changed by forces outside of your control. Like, what was going through your head? What was going through your head at that point?
I probably, to an extent, when it first happened, was still under the impression that I could do something about it, and I tried. So I actually went to the extent of contacting some of the people that he was communicating with, and basically threatened them with the police or legal action. There was a couple of people locally that I also a text that I knew he was involved with, and told them to leave him alone, or that I would go straight to the police, and I would make it my mission to make sure that the police knew everything about them and would um and they were involved in criminal. I'm not talking about just exchanging memes here. I'm talking about when the criminal behaviour started. So, but it didn't make any difference. It didn't change anything. No one cared. Got blocked. Told to get lost. But seeing that, so I mistakenly thought that I could still influence that and stop it, but those around me were more right than me, and said there's very little you can do. You have to support. You have to try and engage. You obviously need to engage professional services, but that's very, very difficult. I don't know what it's like in a Melbourne or in a cities, but in semi-rural, it's it's difficult to get a psychologist. Children's services are over capacity. You can't get a psychiatrist. It's very difficult to say. And as you quite rightly said at the beginning of this interview, we're all just learning about this. This is all still, millions of people watched Adolescence and probably thought, holy shit, what's this all about? And in fact, I watched Adolescence and thought, holy shit. And it was only really once I watched Adolescence did I think, oh my God, there's a lot of similarities there. There was most certainly manosphere crossovers, and a lot of behaviors, violence towards women, incel culture. Yeah.
Speaking about that, were there specific platforms or specific influencers, people, or videos, famous kind of faces or names, that the young person was engaging with?
No, I don't know actually. I would say yes, without a doubt. But he had become very good at obviously clearing internet history and clearing his tracks. And in fact, I had even at one point I'd installed OpenDNS on my router, which is an open source project that effectively doesn't include a lot of pornographic material. It won't route you to pornographic website. You type in whatever pornography site.com. It won't route that because it's not in the DNS directory. So I actually thought that was a clever way, but he managed to circumnavigate that as well. So he was very good at eventually clearing his tracks. The main platform to begin with was most certainly Discord and Reddit. And after that, if I'm being honest, I'm not really sure because it was so hard to keep a track, you know. And I'd also, it was a few years ago. There's been a lot of trauma on for me and from him. So I don't really remember, but yes, you know, there was, it was most certainly, it was Andrew Tate style influencers. You know, it was manosphere, yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that women are second to men. You need to do this to be strong, to be manly, to act in a certain way. This is what the world wants. This is what women want you to be like. You know,
As a cybersecurity expert, there's a lot of, I mean, you're mentioning about open DNS. A lot of parents wouldn't understand the acronym
you'll be
DNS has anything to do with
googling that
computers.
now. You'll be googling that. What's open
Yeah,
DNS?
that's right. But obviously, it was still really difficult to control, some of this content. Can you share what kind of technical, practical challenges you encountered first, and then secondly, I'll ask you about, well, yeah, why do you think it was just blocking the Wi-Fi or changing the Wi-Fi
Yeah.
password that was the end
So
result? But second
could a
question,
parent?
first question is, yeah, what technical or practical things did you challenges did you run into?
Not, I mean, well, I actually made that comment at the beginning of the podcast about the interview about the iPhone settings. So, you know, in my professional opinion, the Apple range of products is far more secure than Android or Windows in terms of operating systems. So if your child's got a smartphone, try and make sure it's iPhone if you can. And for a computer, use a Mac. They are better at being locked down. It's easier for the parent to manage that, and it's more secure. It's less, easy to get around that. However, as I made the point, I have a younger son at the moment, who's still in grade 6, and he has an iPad, and with parental settings on it, they're excellent, really, really good. But there was a recent update, and we had noticed that in using YouTube Kids, which is still a kids app allegedly, there was some of the language that some of the YouTubers were using that my wife was sort of listening to, thinking that's a bit much, and it become basically teen content. So whilst he wasn't able to use YouTube because we had blocked that app, the parental settings on the YouTube Kids app basically had been completely removed. So he was watching teenage content on YouTube Kids. And basically, once we investigated that, looked like it was due to an update, and most of the settings had gone amiss, and had to reset everything. That's not ideal. Who's going to know that? Who's going to know how to do it? But as I say, if you're going to use a device without, I don't hold any Apple shares, but it'll be an iPhone or a Mac. I would advise personally. And I'll be honest, if you're using a Windows laptop, because they're a lot cheaper, and schools, sometimes give out Windows netbooks and things. There are various parental safety apps, but my own experience is, a determined young person will get around it.
And then why do you think it was just changing the Wi-Fi password in the end that was just the best protection?
Yeah, so he had an iPhone, which we had the parental settings on, and he went out and bought another phone, or was given a phone, so that I didn't have control of, that had a passcode lock on it. It was an Android. I think he broke various phones as well, but he ended up using various different in fact, at one point there were 2 or 3 handsets in his room. And then with the computer, as I say, it was basically a cat and mouse game. I'd find something, block it, he'd get around it. I'd find how he'd done that, block that, and then he'd get around it a week later. It's a constant cat and mouse game, to the point where he was basically uninstalling the operating system. It's an hour and a half's work to just reflash Windows 10 back in, no parental safety settings. So the only thing I had control of was that I had a Wi-Fi router that I bought. It was a TP-Link router with a gaming settings on it. And I set a very, very long password to the router, and was then able to control not only net access times, but also block sites through the router. So if there was extreme behavior, so when this first started to happen, we would say to him, look, he would go out like at 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, what are you doing? You got school tomorrow. I don't care. So I'd say, well, look, if you're going to go out, there's no Wi-Fi tomorrow. I'll just block you. I'll block your device, or I'll change your Wi-Fi password, and that's it. You won't have access to the internet. So that worked to start with, for, I don't know, a few weeks. And then of course he didn't need the Wi-Fi password because they were then just using SIM cards, mobile networks. Again, started off with using a SIM card that we had given him in his phone. And then he obviously had worked out that, hold on a second, I don't need that. I could just go and buy one from Woolworths and get a bit of data in it, stick it in my phone, and I'm good to go. Yes, I've got a different phone number, but I'm using Snapchat and Discord to communicate with people anyway. So it doesn't matter about the phone number. I don't care about phone number. All I care about is I've got data access.
Yep.
So yes, the Wi-Fi, it basically became the actions to try and stop this stuff all funneled down to the only way I could try and stop the behavior was controlling the Wi-Fi access, but that literally lasts a few weeks, and then he didn't need Wi-Fi access anyway. And I know that as a parent, there are probably some parents who listen to this would just say, well, why don't you take the device then? Just take the phone. Or remove the computer. And we did remove the computer in the end, but you can't do that with phones because one, they'll just go and get a phone. And two, because as a teenager, they do need access to their friends, even if those friends aren't necessarily particularly healthy or what you would like them to have as friends. You think you end up doing more damage if you just remove and block and say, that's it, you're not having a phone or you're not having a computer and you're not having any money. They will find a way. They'll steal or they'll borrow money and they'll get a secondhand phone. You can pick up cheap phones on Facebook Marketplace for $20-$30. Woolworths sell brand new ones for $60-$70. They're not expensive. Don't need to have a laptop to do this stuff. You can do it all through a phone. So what are you going to do? You're going to remove every phone you find? It's not feasible. It's not healthy. It's not a good relationship to have.
I agree. I feel like I was listening. I'll link it in the description, but there's a few podcasts around, and a few books around parenting teenagers. And yeah, one of the worst things you can do is just for a teenager, it's about 20 years ago for me, but if you just cut me off from my friends, that's basically a death sentence. I'd rather, as a teenager, damn, I'd rather die. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to figure out who I am. Yeah.
Well, you just said that about I'd rather die. We've had suicidal, things going on, and you also don't want to go. We had a lot of self-harm. So the last thing you want to do, you're absolutely right, is you don't want to be pushing somebody down that road. You really don't.
That's why it's just so hard, because honestly, hearing this, this is. I love my parents, but they're not very tech savvy. I don't know they know how to change the Wi-Fi password. I think if I changed it, they'd never be able to get back in. So, you've done 100 times more than I feel like a lot of parents would be capable of, or that would want to do, but it's still just so tricky and so hard.
I'd even added some of the domain names to the Etsy host file in Windows. So basically that Windows wouldn't resolve the addresses. You type in, whatever site, manosphere.com. That's not a real website, I don't think, but manosphere.com, and it wouldn't resolve to that site. Again, that would work for a bit, for a few weeks, and then it'd work out how to get around it.
Moving on a little bit from the, I guess, technical side, maybe talking just a little bit more about men in general, but from the research that I've seen, it seems like young men are a little bit more susceptible to this. Why do you think, in your experience as a parent, and then looking after being the main carer for this young person, why do you think, or do you have any exposure to why it's young men that are maybe more susceptible?
Joe, I think you're right that it is more young men, but there are, of course, young women that are subjected to tradwife type material on TikTok, which is I think is a newish kind of trend. I say that, I'm probably going to show my age. Probably people say it's been around for ages. What are you on about? Is this traditional wife, type stuff. So I mean, you're right, though. It is mainly young men, and certainly the extreme behaviour is mainly young men. And my answer is actually I'm not really quite sure. I think I don't know, societal pressures to impress. I absolutely, personally, I absolutely hate this whole alpha male thing. It just is alien to me, and it's immediately a turn off. But when you're a young guy, it's clearly not a turn off. I suppose they see stuff on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, that content that's not necessarily real. So Andrew Tate, let's just pick him because he deserved to be picked. You pick an Andrew Tate character that's, coming over as strong and tough, and he's got a Mercedes and he's got a Porsche and he's got a big house, and they're watching that stuff going, I'd like that. I'd like a Porsche. I don't want my dad's car. My dad's got a really shit car, right? Crappy Ford Galaxy or whatever else. I don't want that. I want a Porsche. I should have I want a Rolex. I don't want a crappy, SEO watch. I want a Rolex. No, what stuff? It's not real. Most of it's not real. It's not. They don't have a boat. It doesn't have 3 mansions or 5 cars. But yet on YouTube and TikTok, it's highly polished, and the videos look great, and the messaging is strong, and it's addictive, and the algorithms, we all know now. They push this content and it becomes more extreme. All you've got to do is watch 1 or 2 of these videos, and suddenly your feed is filled with this content, and it becomes gradually more and more extreme. I don't know if that's the algorithm necessarily pushing you more extreme stuff, or whether it's human nature that we just, or maybe male nature, that we just sort of seek out slightly more extreme content. I don't know. That appears to be what happens. It appears to be starting off with something that can be reasonably innocent, watching videos about, like on YouTube now, there's a million videos about how to make a business, how to make a startup. So 15-year-old boys and girls are seeing content about how you can start a business tomorrow with no money and make 100 grand a week. Most it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it can start with that idea, and then within a few videos, that might be a slight exaggeration, but within a few weeks of watching that content, you started from watching a video about how you start your own business and be a millionaire in 2 weeks, to suddenly, controlling women because that's what they need to be controlled,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so in light of Australia's coming up with these new regulations, talking about, blocking social media access for teenagers and young people. Do you, as someone who knows both sides of this story, as a parent and as somebody who obviously frequents the web and knows a lot about how the web works, do you think these rules what do you think they'll achieve?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm positive about it because it's a good start. No other country in the world has gone this far. So first of all, those that have done this should be applauded for their efforts so far. Is it going to fix the problem? Probably not. Will there be lots of young people that will circumnavigate the age restrictions? Absolutely. There'll be ways around it, 100%. But for some young people, it will make it more difficult, potentially. And I think that it does give parents now a legitimate reason to say, no, you're not having it. Why not? Because it's against the law. If my 10-year-old son now said to me, I want to access a porn site or want to have a smoker packet of cigarettes, it's a no. And it's a no because it's unhealthy, and it's a no because it's against the law, and I'm not going to get nicked for it. So that's good for those parents that are prepared to say to their child, no, it ain't happening. It's not happening because you're not old enough. So it's a start, and it's going to hopefully will be organic, and it will improve. I think it will improve. I actually think they've done a clever thing in putting the emphasis on the media platform to say that you are responsible for policing this, and you've got to do this technology. We're not telling you how to do it. We're not going to force a particular technology on you. You're a technology company. Your problem, you sort it out. If you don't sort it out, we'll fine you. I actually think that's a really good way of doing it. And I think no doubt there's going to be some big fines. I don't think it'll be very long before Meta Snapchat and and the others, Reddit,
Discord and
maybe
Reddit.
hit
Yeah.
maybe hit with some big fines, and maybe then there'll be improvements, technological improvements. There's a social change that needs to happen. That's far more complicated. This is the funny thing about this. It's weird to even say that the social change is way more harder than the technical change. Technical change should be quite easy, really. I don't have the answers, but when I see things like extreme pornographic images available on Instagram to anybody pretty much, and Instagram Meta will say, oh, we can't detect this stuff, we can't police all this stuff. Hold on a minute, you've got AI technology now that can scan an image in a matter of a few seconds and can say with a confidence score whether or not that image looks like it could be inappropriate for that age group. Then ban it and hold the image, hold the post until it's been reviewed. And it's the same with social media posts on Facebook and Discord. There are AI algorithms, all the technology we've got now and all the AI tech we've got, that the world's gone AI mad right now. There is, I don't have the answer, but I know that there is the technology for Meta to put in place within a few months to say that the algorithm will monitor all posts, all private communications, and it can detect when there is behavioral changes that are risky. So if it's a 15-year-old, or it's, I'm not meant to be 15, but if it's a young person between the age of 16 and 18, should they be talking about exchanging explicit photographs, or should they be talking about knives or red pill, blue pill? The algorithm, the software should be able to look at that stuff and look at memes. We've got image detection now that can look at a meme. You can post a meme into ChatGPT now and say, what does this mean? What does this meme mean? What's it trying to say? And it will tell you most of the time very accurately, very accurately what it means. So the tech is there. So I think it's rubbish when these tech people say, "Oh, we can't do it," and it's freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. Freedom of speech is great, but freedom of speech is now also killing young people because we've let it unfettered access. There you go. There's the whole internet. There's all these weirdos and strange people. Just go for it. Help yourself. So the technology does exist to be able to limit, not stop, but limit this stuff. So to answer your question, sorry, that's another rant. So to answer your question, the changes to the Australian legislation are most certainly a very good start. It's not going to fix it in one go. It's going to need to adapt and change. And only really the technology companies are going to be able to fix this.
So we've got this e-safety hackathon coming up. You're going to be a speaker, which is great. mlai-au is putting it on with the University of Melbourne and the e-safety commissioner. What kind of solutions or supports do you think will come out of this, or need to come out of this, in order to maybe give parents some more tools, or to help protect young people from this kind of content?
I think what is going to have to be a massive effort, and it's going to have to be teachers, parents, kids, technology companies, government are all going to have to somehow come together. And I know that's not realistic because it doesn't work. The system doesn't work that way. But a starting point is to better educate teachers about this technology, in particular AI, because I know for a fact that most teachers have no idea. And those that do use ChatGPT to put lesson notes together, and that's basically the extent of it. Most kids know how to use AI pretty well, and way better than teachers and their parents. As you said a minute ago, your parents wouldn't know how to reset their Wi-Fi password. How do you expect them to know how to use AI? So we really need to start off with educating teachers and parents. We need to educate parents and teachers on AI and the social media technologies and platforms, and how to make them safer and how to identify the behaviors. We need more psychologists in rural areas as well as inner city, more psychiatrists. We don't necessarily, in my very humble opinion, we don't need to be over medicalizing it and going straight to, are they depressed? Let's give them some pills, or they're psychotic or anything like that. And for the technological perspective, which is obviously what the hackathon is about, we need people. We need young. My opinion is we need young people to come up with some really brilliant, ingenious ideas that could eventually actually turn into a startup that in itself might end up getting purchased, consumed by one of these technology companies, that you could make a startup that could make money, and then Meta could step in and say, actually, that's a really good technology. That saves us a whole crap ton of research and money. We'll just buy that and implement that. And that's what I think needs to come from this ecosystem, this startup ecosystem. We all know that startups can be very, very successful. And it just needs some young people to come up with some ingenious ideas on how to prevent this stuff, how to reduce it.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking now, that part of the problem is some of these like startup videos that are out there, start a business with $0. And then that is kind of like a gateway video that then leads you down this like management path. Let's put these videos out there. Come on, young people, watch these instead. You can make $1 billion, but you got to make it by helping us police some of this stuff.
It's clickbait culture, rather than just saying, I can teach you to start a business, and you can start online business with not a lot of money, but you got to bloody work hard at it. It doesn't just, the sales just don't come in on their own. Meta's not going to turn around in a week's time and send you an email and say, hey, we'll give you $50 million to buy your little business. You got to work at it. It's not, and also you need to accept failure, because as you know, and I know, most startups don't work out, they fail. Really, there's clearly not a desire in big companies to solve this issue. I honestly don't think they really do care. I'm sure, Zuckerberg and whoever else has, stood up in front of Congress and said, we do care and we're very sorry. But, well, you don't really though, do you? Because you haven't actually fixed the problem. Because if I had a social media platform and somebody told me that some kids died or took their own life because of what was happening on my platform, one, I'd be really, really gutted that I would not be able to sleep at night time. And two, I'd be freezing the whole bloody thing until we fixed it. That's what I would do. And that's what needs to happen. But of course, that ain't going to happen.
There are a lot of people concerned when we talk about e-safety. A lot of people in Australia are very negative. I know, because I even just posting a few things about the e-safety hackathon, I've got a bunch of people saying, but what about freedom of speech? And they're trying to stop us from using the internet. And a lot of the time they're adults, so I'm not sure if they've read the legislation. But
none of these are kids.
What would you have to say to people that are worried that maybe this is a slippery slope, or maybe the government shouldn't be trusted to kind of step in on these kind of issues?
Yeah, well, it hasn't worked up until this point, has it? No one's fixed the problem. No one's stopped it. So what do you expect? If it's very easy to sit in your chair behind, a username on Reddit and go, oh, this is, invading my freedom of speech and this is a slippery slope. But I don't know, maybe it is a bit of a slippery slope, but whatever we've tried to do, if we've tried to do anything up until this point, hasn't worked, because nothing has changed. If anything, it's getting worse. Right? So social media is affecting young people's lives, and their social interactions and social skills and their mental health. There's a reason why we've got a mental health crisis with young people. It's loneliness, and part of that is using social media rather than actually interacting with other peers face to face. So is it a slippery slope? I don't know. Do you know what? Maybe I'll go this far and say that we accept, most adults accept that it's not appropriate to post stuff about Nazis, positive things about Nazi Germany, and of Nazis, sorry, and the swastika, and you shouldn't post that online. Okay, that's a banned image I believe, and we shouldn't be posting anything that's even remotely promoting it. I think I would like to think that most adults would agree with that. Okay, well that's basically censorship. That's we're censoring. So is it not also fair to censor information about suicidality, self-harm, eating disorders, promoting violence towards women, violence towards other men. It's the same, isn't it? It's the same outcome. Humans are getting hurt. The difference is here, it's all young people. So do we care? Do we honestly? Do people that, are spouting out the freedom of speech, and have you thought about this? Do you actually know what's going on? Well, they clearly don't. So my point is, all the things that we've done up until this point haven't worked. So what do you expect? At some point, something has to change. So it's either going to be the government stepping in and saying, this is how it's going to be. If you've got a better idea, then start talking about your ideas. In fact, if you've got a better idea, come to the hackathon with mlai and give us your idea and build a bloody solution that will help solve the problem. And then the government doesn't have to step in and control it. And then you can have your freedom of speech. You can spout all your bullshit online or whatever you want to say, whatever your opinion is. Plus, you can still protect children. Best of both worlds.
I know you mentioned that, maybe there's not a lot of people that have gone through this, but I think you're right. We are at the beginning and we need to start talking about it because it's definitely not going away if we don't do anything.
Agreed.
Okay, well, that's probably where I'm going to cut off the interview. Is there maybe one last question before we wrap it up? And it'll be a quick one, but do you have any advice for parents given your experience with this
I do.
whole scenario?
Thank you for asking me. I do. More of a rant. Parents, regardless of your technical expertise, I believe it is your responsibility as a parent to understand this stuff. I understand that's difficult. It's easy for me to say that as a technical person. However, if you've got a young teenager in this day and age, then it is my belief that it's your responsibility to protect that person. And that means understanding some of this technology. So you have to take it upon yourself to learn what's going on with ChatGPT. What's it being used for? What sort of questions are being asked on there? What is Discord? What even is Discord? And how's it being used and how are they using it? And what is meme culture? And I know it's all very difficult and people have got full-time jobs and, are not at the same age group and it all sounds very alien. And it is, to me, mostly quite alien, but you have to make it your job to understand this stuff, at least have a basic understanding so that you can try to identify when some of the behaviors start to flag up. And unusual technology usage, that you can start to do something about it. So it's not a complete and utter shock. You don't know what's going on. I believe it's parents' responsibility. I know that sounds really elitist. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm saying the wrong thing, but when you're a parent and you bring a child into this world, when they're a young child, you do everything you can to make sure they don't open the fridge door, you don't go near the hot cooker, don't open the microwave, don't touch hot water, all these things we do with young toddlers. But it seems like we kind of remove all those protections, not those same protections, but remove a lot of the protections as they get that bit older. And as they surpass us in their technical expertise, we kind of go, well, I don't really understand it. So, what do you want me to do about it? And I know there are some parents that think that, allowing their children, because that's what they are, that allowing their children to consume pornographic material is okay. It's that phrase, it's just what boys do. Boys will be boys. Well, I'm afraid that it ain't quite as simple as that because it's not Playboy anymore. He's not looking for a Playboy magazine like it was in the 80s and the early 90s. Now we're talking about extreme, sometimes violent material. And if you're not looking at it, and if you're not checking your young person's history and their device, if you don't know what they're consuming, then you don't know what they're consuming. And then therefore you don't know what the effect is going to be. And you really don't want to end up in my boat, I can promise you now.